Hello? Oh my God, am I live? Hang on. I can't actually tell if this is live. My God, I'm so bad at technology. Anyway, I think this is live. We're going to find out. I decided I would do a live stream. I should be looking over there. I decided I was going to do a live stream because even if I do these things pre-recorded, it's not like I edit anything. It's not like I can stop the dogs from barking. It's not like I can, I'm not professional. So I might as well come here. So I might as well just like, do it live, fly by the seat of my pants. Okay. It also means there's less of a time limit because I was using Clipchamp and it cuts out at certain times. All right. So I came on today to talk about, finally, the Broken Plea book by Christopher Whitcomb. I'm going to have to, I am not good at doing two things at once. So things pop up and I have no idea what's going on. I wanted to talk about chapter 13 specifically in Christopher Whitcomb's book, Broken Plea, right? I will be quoting heavily from chapter 13, so it'll be pretty obvious when I do that because it won't sound like me talking. It'll sound like him quoting various documents or, I'm just saying it now. I quote heavily from his book and then I add my little 2 cents. But, I felt like so many of you out there are doing the heavy lifting when it comes to all of the documents that are coming out. I sit back and I watch people talk about the autopsy reports of the Idaho 4 and, I really don't, I admire everybody for being able to sort of theorize on how things happen and stuff. I just don't have that kind of brain. I would have really needed a trial to lay it out for me so that I knew who was lying and who wasn't. I think we've all seen that there's a lot of, as I like to call it, a lot of discrepancies in how the investigation was carried out, which brings me to chapter 13 of Broken Plea. So the reason why I focused on that is because the whole reason why I got into this topic was because of the use of forensic investigative genetic genealogy. I find it to be a slightly dystopian technology. And so when you've got your government using it, it really does need to be regulated. And it wasn't regulated at all. It hasn't been regulated at all, as this case will demonstrate. So why chapter 13? Well, because it was about the DNA on the sheath and how they used the FIGG. Chapter 13 also was where Whitcomb shows how Ann Taylor she extracted testimony from those 3 key witnesses. One was Brett Payne, the lead investigator. Then it was Riley Nowlin, who was, I think, probably in a managerial position, head scientist at the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab. And then Matthew Gamet, who also was I think he had an administrative role at the lab there, same lab as Riley Nowlin. The reason why the testimony was being given was because it was a hearing to have a Franks. Obviously, there was no Franks. Hitler didn't grant that. So it was the hearing to have a Franks. And that was obviously to show that the probable cause affidavit was less than truthful. Honestly, I think it was very obvious that there was a lot of less than truthful things happening there with that. So Anne Taylor, she commenced by questioning Brett Payne. I didn't know Brett Payne had a military background, so there was a nice connection for me. For when we find out that they went to the Department of Defense for information. For me, Brett Payne in this saga, he was there to protect his baby. His baby was the probable cause affidavit, and he did that. He did that by being vague, by obfuscating, and he diffused accountability for that document until ultimately there was none. And he was very successful. You have to hand it to the little man. He was successful in protecting his baby, right? The two things that Anne Taylor was able to get from Brett Payne when he was under oath was that he didn't receive Bryan Kohberger's name from the FBI until the 19th of December 2022, and that the FBI never told him that it was Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath. And that might sound like a minor point, but it actually is a huge point, because it goes to processes, and it shows that it really was a reverse engineered investigation. It was reverse engineered, and that's not how it's meant to go. The other point that I found interesting was that I didn't know someone in that orbit contacted a Department of Defense representative through the FBI Salt Lake City Division on the 1st of December 2022, seeking to determine what would be required to have the K-bar sample run through the DOD's repository. So the Department of Defense's repository. That's what, I kind of thought that might be Brett Payne, to be honest. That's why I said there was a connection. And that was done on the 1st. And I don't know if doing that, I don't know if that's the same as the FBI in Quantico, Virginia. I really don't know. I think they are two separate entities. But yeah, I'd love to know what that repository of data consisted of. What did they have? Obviously databases, but I wonder what else they had. Actually, and then I figured out that it wasn't the FBI, actually, because they were already involved. They were already involved early on in the case, so it really was another entity. Okay, so what else did I write down? So Whitcomb moves on to explain how Anne Taylor sought to show that there might be exculpatory evidence for Bryan Kohberger. And in a world where we didn't have sort of such nefarious tech, and we had more stringent and ethical processes in place, then she might have succeeded. However, it's pretty apparent to me that Anne Taylor was just sort of like a minor character in like a pilot study where interim policies and procedures of the Department of Justice proved utterly unfit for purpose. I didn't know it was an interim policy. That was also made explicit to me, and it just blew my mind. So to me, it being an interim policy shows that it was literally the wild fucking West when they did that. And if I had a chance to ask Hitler what he was thinking and if it was worth it, I would ask him, but I think he would think it's worth it, because he's a baby boomer and they don't really care about anything else other than law and order. So there's that. So what was the exculpatory evidence? It was that after the ISP forensic lab with Nowlin had pried everything they could from that DNA on the sheath, they ran it through CODIS. They got nowhere except that it was a single source DNA. So they passed it on to their contracted help at Othram, right? That alone raised chain of custody issues, right? Which I'm not going to get into today, but that alone has its own chain of custody issues when it went from them to, from the ISP lab to Othram. There was some guy who was supposed to be transporting it, Willifred to Willifan to, it's just, but anyway, maybe chain of custody for another day. But so when Othram got it, they also hit a brick wall because they didn't have access to the databases that they needed. So they ended up hitting on four brothers. I've heard Jules say that they were cousins. Maybe they were cousins. It could well have been. I don't know where she got that from. But either way, it landed on four related people, right? Now, what totally spun me out in this next bit was how Othram was completely oblivious to societal norms, right? They contacted the ISP lab and asked them if they could cold call the four brothers to ask if they'd like to provide their DNA to help further their genealogical work. I mean, think about that. They wanted the police to cold call complete strangers in the community. Like, is that common procedure? Is that common procedure? How did they rationalize that in their mind? Did they think that would sort of be like the equivalent to police canvassing, going door knocking and asking people for information? Is that how they rationalize that? Because that frightens me. That's some serious ideological fundamentalist crap right there, which for me blew my mind. But maybe I'm making a big deal out of nothing. But I don't think I am making a big deal out of nothing, because one of the four brothers said that they wanted nothing to do with the investigation. I hope he put some kind of complaint in, a formal complaint. And I'd also like to know how Riley Nowlin felt about it, and the Gamut dude, if that raised any red flags for them. I'd be curious to know. So Othram, we got the four brothers. What happens next? All right. So because Othram couldn't press ahead with the agenda of figuring out who this DNA belonged to, they basically got ditched. They got ditched by the police department, and they sent all of that work, all the working out, all the preliminary stuff to the FBI in Quantico, Virginia. So we know how we keep on going on about how the Department of Justice broke their own policies and procedures, but it really does pay to note, you should pay attention to the fact that this was an interim policy. It wasn't even a policy. You could say, oh yeah, policy, it's not law, but it was an interim policy. It was nothing. It was literally nothing. There was absolutely nothing in place to regulate this kind of tech. Right? And that also frightens me because of the precedents that this case has set. It has, well, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say it has set precedents because it didn't go to trial. But it's, it happened. It did happen. I'd need some legal advice on that. Anyway, I just want to read what this interim policy said. This is me obviously quoting Whitcomb, who was quoting the policy. A prosecutor may authorize the investigative use of FGG for violent crimes other than homicide or sexual offences, while observing and complying with all requirements of this interim policy when the circumstances surrounding the criminal acts present a substantial and ongoing threat to public safety or national security. There is literally no one who could be exempt from that very wide-ranging policy if they set their eyes on you. If the authorities put their eyes on you, then there is absolutely no escaping that. And their eyes are literally everywhere in 2025, 26. That's how we live. So what did I want to say now? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So just going back to how oblivious Othram were to, just cold calling people or getting the lab to cold call people. Even though it might have been an awkward situation, they still actually had to ask. They actually still had to get permission. But if you look at the trend of everything, I think eventually, if you keep using that justification of law and order, they're not even going to ask anymore. I think we're very, very, very far down that slippery slope now. And it's all being done in the name of safety. You can justify anything in the name of public safety or national security. So, what did you do, Bryan? And so I think I want to end by saying, when I was putting this all together and trying to arrange it in my head, not only did I get slightly depressed, because you actually see, as Lana likes to say, the fuckerage. You see it all, and that you wonder to yourself, well, what's the point? Like, this is just so far gone. But, we have to keep on keeping on. We have to keep on calling it out. But ultimately, I wanted to say the truth shouldn't be so hard and shouldn't be so convoluted. I know that they referred to that probable cause affidavit as a living document. Thank you, Jules, for reminding me of that today. But, you shouldn't be going to a judge and saying, hi, this is a living document. Can you give us a warrant to do such and such? I'm fairly sure that's not how it works. So, yeah. I think that's all I wanted to say. What else did I write down? Yeah, and I just wanted to reinforce the fact that when Jeff Nye was trying to, say that it wasn't an invasion of privacy, he said it was about the public writ large. But I think the public writ large, sir, is not in these databases. We have not consented. It's a small amount of people who have consented to have their privacy upended like that, which is why you've got Othram trying to get the police to cold call Four Brothers. So I think, God, I hope that makes sense. I can't even not put that out if I don't want to. Maybe I can. Anyway, now that business is out of the way, how's everybody? I hope you're all good. Life has been hard since about December. My dogs have been unwell. Family members that haven't been great. Got a guy over there that's got man flu. Poor thing. And I think life in general just is feeling a little bit hard at the moment. But I'm doing this thing called radical love, where I'm just trying to be, instead of angry all the time, because people have a way of making me angry, I'm just trying to be chill and, trying to bear that in mind. Just, calm down, just be nice. Don't be a bitch all the time. No one likes a bitch. And that's it. Haven't really had much else to say. I've read a lot of books. I've listened to a lot of books because I have Audible, so I've gone through a lot of books. It was really interesting because one of the books that I read just after Broken Plea was one by a psychologist called Samantha Stein. And it's her job, or it was her job, to go into prisons of, I think, sexual predators. And she sort of had to make sure that when their time came up to be released, that they were able to be released. If she felt like they were still a threat, if their profile posed a threat, then she had the power basically to keep them in there, not to be released. And I listened to her on the Consult. It's the Consult podcast, and they're all retired FBI agents. And I really, really enjoyed that podcast. So tune in if you can. Sorry, baby, but you've got a huge knot, and I had to take it out. Sorry. And this woman, this psychologist, Samantha Stein, she took her job of not trying to impinge on the civil liberties of these offenders who are in jail, and she took it very serious that she had the power to restrict their liberty of being set free. And I was just like, wow, that's cool. That's great. But could we sort of focus more on the civil liberties that are being stripped of people just in common society who haven't done anything wrong? Like, it's all well and good, but hey, our civil liberties are being ripped away from us all the time. I mean, anyway, I've said a lot about the panopticon and cameras and stuff. So, yeah. That's why. Don't think about it too much because it will do your head in. Anyway, I think I've rambled enough. I'm going to go downstairs and look after my boy that has man flu. And hopefully that's all it is man flu. But we are in that season. See how dark it is? It's been cold. Anyway, have a lovely day, everybody. And I guess if there's any more developments, I'll see you back here. But bye. Oh my God, how do I stop it? End stream. That would help.